The Influencer's Edge is brought to you by the Rapid Sales Accelerator. If you're ready to skyrocket your sales by 30% or more in just 90 days, then you need to claim your free training right now. You'll learn 4 words that will compel your prospects to trust you like they were children within the first 3 to 5 minutes of any conversation across any platform and any medium. You'll learn how to give your prospects objection amnesia, to crush objections like, I need to talk to my spouse, or I need more time to think it over, or it's too expensive. If you'd like to claim your free training now, go to www.paulrossbook.com. Do it before your competition does it, now. Welcome to the Influencer's Edge. This is the place where you come to get the latest breakthroughs, cutting-edge insights, tools, and techniques to leapfrog over the pack in sales, persuasion, and influence. Be sure you visit our website at www.theinfluencersedge.com. And while you're there, subscribe to us via your favorite network. Now sit back, tune in, and enjoy today's episode. Welcome to the Influencer's Edge. It's been a New York minute, but we are back with a very special guest. He is a colleague and a friend of mine, and really, really good at one of my great loves, one of my favorite disciplines, neurolinguistic programming. He is the often imitated but never duplicated Damon Cart. Damon, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Good to be here again.
And so let me give the brief bio, and then we're going to jump into talking about the core concept, the self-concept model. All right. So Damon Cart is a coach, speaker, and the co-founder of the Self-Concept Research Group. He is the world's leading expert in creating long-term internal transformations using the self-concept model, which is what we want to talk about today. We're going to unpack that. He's a master at helping teachers, therapists, coaches, high-performance trainers create lasting change for their students and clients at the identity level. So, as someone who's speaking to you as someone who's massively invested, you're smiling because you're immediately getting the scope ambiguity of the statement. We're just playing shop here, folks. Speaking to you as someone who's massively invested and in love with the process of personal change. Talk about this idea, the idea of core identity. And I have found when working with clients, oftentimes I'll do a particular change technique, whatever it may be. Sometimes it holds, sometimes it doesn't. Oftentimes what will happen is they'll go back into their environment where all the old environmental cues are there that triggers them.
Yeah.
Or there's other things going on. There's parts, the NLP parts model. So let's first of all talk about your mentor, Steve Andreas, and how you learned this model from him and how it changed you, first of all, as a person, and then how you apply it.
Definitely. It was a very serendipitous thing that happened. You know, it was not something like, oh, I want to meet this guy, Steve Andreas. He was retired at the time and hadn't heard much about him. And Connie Ray had just begun teaching again. She had gone through a years-long illness of, I don't think they were ever able to really figure out what it was, but it was fatigue, basically chronic fatigue. And there was a institute in San Francisco. They were hosting her, and I knew the guy because I'd done a lot of his courses, and he called me up and said, "Hey, Connie Ray's coming to town. We're going to be out of town. Would you cover? Would you pick her up at the airport, make sure she gets to the training on time, take care of her, take her to dinner, the whole thing, and you get to do the training for free?" And I was like, "Great, I get to do some free training." I was kind of broke at the time. And Connie Ray and I hit it off really well. I really loved her wholeness work model that she was teaching. And she went back home to Colorado, and I thought, oh, I don't know when I'll see her again, but hopefully soon. And then a few months later, I get an email from Steve, and it was just completely out of the blue. He said that Connie Ray had nice things to say about me, and he was curious about me and if he could help me out at all. you know, don't hesitate to ask. And I was like, oh man, this guy has no idea what he just got himself into. And at the time, I had done pretty much all of the trainings in the area. I'm living in Santa Cruz. I'd done, you know, Diltz's training, Judith Delogio's training. I went up to San Francisco, did trainings, and I was kind of out of trainings. And I knew that I was hitting a plateau. And I was just like, okay, well, how do I continue to grow? How do I continue to do the things that I want to do? And by this time, I had realized I wanted to be an NLP teacher and coach. I had an insurance business at the time that wasn't doing well, and I wasn't into. I didn't like insurance, and I had took me some time to finally admit that to myself. And so Steve came around at the perfect time as I was bumping up against this plateau. And I just peppered him with questions via email. And he said, hey, I can't keep up with your questions. Let's get on Skype. So we got on Skype and I would hold him for hours asking him one question after another. And he really liked my eagerness to learn.
Right.
You could see I was
Yeah.
just really absorbing this. And everything he was telling me, I was putting into practice, which it was funny when I finally met his son, Mark. I brought Mark over to teach core transformation here in Santa Cruz. And the first thing he said was, hey, what my dad says is there's an interesting thing about Damon. If you tell him to do something, he will do it.
Yeah.
And I thought that was weird at first, but then I realized that many people would come to Steve. They would ask him for help. He would tell them what to do, and then they just wouldn't do it. I was different. He would tell me what to do. I'd go and do it. I would report back to him what I had done. And then eventually I just kept this up for a long time. And finally, he was retired at the time. He was almost 80. And he says, I think I know what you're looking for. I think I know what you're after. And this is after months of me like uh, asking him unlimited amount of questions. And when he said this, I thought to myself, well, good, at least somebody knows what I'm after because I don't know what I'm after. So if he can see it, that's great. He said, I created this model called the self-concept model. My book, Transforming Yourself, is the book where I teach the entire model. He said, I think it's going to answer your questions. And so go read that book, do the exercises, and if you need any help, let me know. I would say the introduction answered most of my questions, and it just blew my mind. And then I got into the exercises, and it was shortly into the book where I had my first transformation. And it felt like, I mean, it felt like the earth moved in a different direction and everything seemed to shift for me. Your reality, when you change a belief about yourself, your reality will feel like it's shifting because your reality is based on your beliefs. And the biggest one, the core of all of those beliefs is your identity. So when you shift one of those beliefs, you really feel it and you see reality differently. So I reported this back to Steve, and he was so complimented by this. He said that the highest compliment is for someone to take my work and then implement it and get the results.
Absolutely
And
true.
yeah, so after at that point, he was like, "Well, why don't you start considering teaching this?" And I was like, I felt weak in the knees when he told me that. And this was exactly what I had been looking for. I was looking for a model that no one else was teaching because one of the problems I was having is why would you pay for me to come and teach you something when you could pay one of my teachers to do the same thing? And they're the ones who taught me. So Steve was basically, and I kind of, you know, I pushed back on it. I was like, Steve, I don't know if I can do this. And he was like, well, why not? I'm retired. No one else is teaching it. And he was absolutely right. But it was so weird that at that time, my mind was so blown that I just didn't know if this was something I could do.
Well,
So I
let's pause. Push the pause button. What was the transformation that you experienced? Can you share it or is it too personal?
No, 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 I can definitely share it. So when you start looking at how to transform, so what we do is we have to chunk it down to qualities. Qualities being generalizations about aspects of who you are. We can't just go straight at your identity. It's too broad, too big of a generalization. So we have to chunk it down to those aspects. So what do you believe about yourself? So you start off with a belief that you feel very certain about and that you like about yourself. When you align your behavior with your values, that's where self-esteem comes from. When
Right.
you believe you are that aspect. So he uses kindness. If you value kindness and you act in alignment with kindness, your self-esteem will go up because that's what you value. If you take it even further and you believe that you are a kind person, then your self-esteem will stay elevated and you will feel confident about yourself. And it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy because you believe you are kind. You have to align with that belief or you'll experience cognitive dissonance, which is very unpleasant. So you align to that and you do it. Now, the same goes for limiting beliefs. If you believe you are something negative, same thing. You will align to those negative beliefs and you will do behaviors consistent with those limiting or negative beliefs.
Let me
Otherwise,
pause you for a second. What if there's good evidence that For example, if you looked around my office, you would say, in terms of papers and such, he's a disorganized person. In terms of ideas, my ideas are very well organized.
Mhm.
So, what if there's actual evidence to support the belief that I don't know if you would call beliefs negative or positive, but less than useful belief?
Mhm.
What happens in that instance?
Yeah, so this is really important because it's actually those what we call counterexamples that are even more important than the positive examples in most cases. Why? Because this is how we learn. This is how, we say we learn from our mistakes, right? A mistake, if we don't learn from it, is wasted. So if we have mistakes that we can learn from, that's going to empower us even more. So to use your example about being organized, you say, if I were to ask you if you're an organized person, I think I know what the answer would be. Are you an organized person?
Depends on the context.
Yes. So this is what I suspected. It's that quality for you is ambiguous.
Yes,
Sometimes you are, and sometimes you're not. In
correct.
certain contexts you are, certain contexts you're not. So believe it or not, this is the most unstable belief. It's the one that's going to fluctuate a lot. Whereas if you have your beliefs that it feels certain are the most stable, including the ones that are negative beliefs, or beliefs that you don't like about yourself. If they
Right.
feel certain, they're more stable. So you have this ambiguous belief that's going to go back and forth, right? So what you probably have, and we could get in and explore it, what you probably have is a database of positive examples of you being organized. And it's organized in this particular way. So those examples represent you being organized in certain ways, in certain contexts. Then you have a database of counterexamples to that. Times when, or experiences when, or examples when, evidence, as you called it, when you go against being organized. And it could be, we could even maybe chunk that down into smaller groups to make them more easily manageable. So in order to create a generalization or to create a belief or a category, I put these all together, belief, generalization, category, all pretty much the same thing the way that I'm using them. What we do is we base that on actual lived examples. Now, the tendency is how we create these is we have a jarring experience, the first time we ever experience it, and it it jars us into opening a category that, oh, this thing happened, so it can happen again. A time when you did something that was very unorganized, and you go, oh, there's this thing called being unorganized, and I just experienced it. So now I open a category of that this might happen again. I might have more of these experiences. You do, and as you do, you select and collect them and put them into this category, which then builds the generalization that you are an unorganized person. Now, it doesn't always happen by the first counterexample. Sometimes it just happens by the worst. You might have something that happens that's
Ah,
kind of negative, and you go, oh, that felt kind of weird. And then it kind of just floats around, no real organization. You might have a few more, but then you have a really bad one. And that one then attracts from the past all of those others you select and collect and put it into a category. And this is how we make sense of the world around us, right? So now you have a case here, a generalization that you are unorganized, and then you have a generalization that you are organized in certain situations. So what we need to do is transform those counterexamples, those group of counterexamples of you being unorganized. And how we do that is we find out, well, what was the positive intention behind whatever it was that you did that led to being unorganized, but we want to get back to the intention. There was a positive intention behind that. So we want to find that. And then we want to find what were the resources that were missing that made it so that you didn't fulfill this intention and maybe also created this other negative thing that you didn't want, which is being unorganized. So we find the missing resources and we recreate the situation so that now you have a reference experience. And we're okay with it not being a real one because we take care of that in a moment. But now we have a reference experience of how you wish you had done this so that you could have been organized. And this is the problem that a lot of people are missing when they make a mistake. They just beat themselves senseless with telling themselves, don't do this again, don't do this again. But their focus is still on what they did wrong, right?
yes, of
They
course.
don't have a new reference of, well, how would I have liked to have done that? And Bandler did this from the beginning of NLP. They would have you come up with three different ways you could have done something, right?
Right.
Give us choice and to point us in a direction of, okay, how do I do this if I'm ever in this situation again? Because if I don't have that reference, I'm just going to recreate exactly what I did all over again. This is especially so. I know you're not a parent, but when I became a parent, I found myself acting in ways just like my parents, ways in which I told myself I would never do it. I would never do this. And you become your parents. Well, why? Because you only reference experiences you have of parenting is how your parents did it, and you're going to grab at the closest thing that you have. So you just follow that. So if you're focused on your mistakes, trying to tell yourself never to do it again, you're just going to keep doing it again because that's all the information you have. But if you give yourself new information about how to do it differently, then you make it more compelling, bigger, brighter image, compelling movie, you're more likely to do that. Now, we're not also not trying to brainwash you to make you think that you never had this unorganized example. That's we want to keep that. But we can archive it. We don't need it front and center in front of your face. We can archive it by making it dark and small, and then we can attach it to the new movie, the new, bigger, brighter, more compelling movie of what you would rather do. So if your mind ever falls on this old memory of what you did that you wish you hadn't, it's immediately compelled by this new movie that it's stuck to of what to do differently. And it's amazing how this will happen. It's almost like a swish pattern. When you get into that situation again, you might start to fall on that old memory and then boom, it redirects your attention to what it is you would rather do.
Wow. We can unpack that one for hours.
Yeah.
The other thing, let me push a button back. I want you to, we barely started to unpack even what the whole idea of a core identity means. Maybe the idea is that it's just a matter of attention deficit disorder. There's only a certain amount of things. Or do you believe there is such a thing?
Oh, I think there's some sort of so like I worked with a kid actually. I don't usually work with teenagers. He's 15, and his mother said he has OCD. And I'm not a licensed therapist. I can't really treat, something like that. And I told her that. And she says, I know, but I've seen your videos. I've seen some of your demonstrations. I really do think you can help my son. So I said, okay, let's give it a try. And what I really helped him do, and I wanted to understand this a little bit better, like what is happening for him is this hyperfixation. And I was like, wow, what he's describing structurally is me when I'm obsessed. So it's very similar to that. So I was like, okay, well, he just needs a way out. He needs a way to shut it off. And one of the ways that I helped him with that was to reframe this whole thing that was happening for him, which fully diagnosed with OCD. And that is that he actually has a talent, a gift of hyper focus. And it's such a powerful tool. He has to be careful where he aims it. But if he aims it on the right stuff, the stuff that he really enjoys, he can really enjoy it up until that point where he starts to feel, because he would tell me he would start to feel like he can't stop and it doesn't feel good. And then so I helped him add resources to be able to like step off the train, so to speak. So I think there is something that's going on there. I think certain people's, their minds just work that way. And I think you will find that a lot of very successful people have some of these, what we call disorders. It's just not being put in a context where it can
Got
really
it.
thrive.
Got it. Got it. So I'm looking at this when I did a little research here. I'm looking at components, counterexamples, coherence, testing, and strengthening. So let's talk about these. Let's tackle them. I don't know if I've got them in order of importance or this is just what ChatGPT listed, but unpack the model a little bit more. You're the master of it in terms of what are the most important concepts.
Okay. First and foremost, I think if you understand or if you approach this with understanding that this is how we make sense of the world around us, um, it's not just about like figuring out myself. And I think people kind of get really wrapped up in like a very self-absorbed pursuits around this. And so it's set that aside and it's like, okay, I'm going to understand how I make sense of the world around me. And what I know about that is it all starts with me, my perception that, is just my awareness, whatever is turned on that allows me to access these five senses and take information in. And then from that point, what is it I do with that information? In order to understand the world around me, I cannot access all of this information all at once. I have to generalize it, distort it, and delete it. So now we're getting back into like NLP basics. This model is based on that absolutely. It doesn't go outside of the boundaries of pure NLP. So if I understand that how I make sense and meaning of the world is how I generalize information, then the ultimate source of that is going to be myself. And we think a lot about our outward beliefs. Well, I can't, make this business work because the economy, or, we make these statements or belief statements about the outside world, you have to then ask yourself, where are those beliefs coming from? For example, if I believe that I live in a hostile world, then I can turn that on myself and say, well, what would I have to believe about myself for that to be true? I'd have to believe that I'm a victim. How well is that serving me? So I might be able to change my belief about the world around me and say, okay, it's not a hostile world, but that's probably going to require that I change something about myself. And if I don't, then it's probably going to be more about a distance, a way of distancing myself from the world. And that's not going to help me either.
Hang on.
Yeah.
I love you're the kind of person I can engage with on this level. If I take the idea that it's a hostile world, I could come to the conclusion, not that I'm a victim, but that okay, I need to be vigilant and prepared. So it's not necessarily taking on the idea of a victim. I happen to believe there's a lot of fucked up, dangerous stuff in the world. I don't walk around expecting to be attacked, but I'm ready if there's a problem.
Sure. I mean, it's what's your overall generalization about it? And then is it serving you? And if not, then what must you believe about yourself to make that true?
Got
Or
it.
to be
That
true?
makes sense.
Yeah. So it's not going to be an absolute that that's the belief you must have about yourself, but that's an example of what kind of belief you would have about yourself if you believed such a thing. The thing about the beliefs about ourself, we cannot escape them. So if I believe I live in a hostile world, I can go live like a hermit or, live a very reclusive life. But what if I believe I'm a failure? There's no, yeah, you can't hide from that. And a lot of people do, and it's unfortunate. I've met a lot of entrepreneurs or people aspiring to be entrepreneurs, and they actually do believe that. They don't come out and say it, but you can ask enough questions to tease out that kind of belief. Now, if you believe you're in the wrong business, like I was with insurance, you can change businesses. If you believe that you're in the wrong market, well, you can change your market. But if you
Right.
believe you're a failure, that you can't escape that, and you will find a way to make that true
Right.
unless you do some work on yourself.
Correct. I agree.
Yeah. So where do you want to go with this? There's so many different
All
directions.
right. No, no. Okay. So someone comes to you and they say, Damon, I am a failure, and here's my proof. My marriage has failed. All my businesses I've ever tried have failed. My health has deteriorated. I, at my core essence, am a failure. And look at all this evidence. What would you say to someone? I mean, that it's quote clinically depressed, close quotes. I know you don't work, you're not a therapist, but you get my idea. What if someone has created through their own belief, through their own bad software, they've generated a fucked up world, and they have so many examples, this mountain of evidence. How do you shift that in a way where it appears real to them? How do you find counterexamples, a life raft of a counterexample, and what to them is a sea of shit? Because I'm sure there's a hypnotic amnesia for everything they've done right. So how do you remove that hypnotic amnesia for all the things they've done well and competently and all the things they've contributed to the world?
Yeah. Well, where do you, I'm just curious if what your thought is on this, being an NLP and hypnosis guy. When people have that kind of amnesia, what do you, in a NLP explanation, what do you think is happening?
I just think I don't think it's an actual hypnotic phenomena, but it's akin to it. There's no real difference between someone who filters away everything they've done competent or that makes them feel good and someone who's been given a deep hypnotic command to forget it. I don't know how that works in the brain.
Yeah, so I think what you said about filtering, I think that's where
Yes.
I would go with it. And where I would take it is it's a structural thing. Our beliefs are structures, and how they're structured determines which content gets into the structure and which content is left out, what's deleted, what's generalized, what's distorted. And so when people have that kind of amnesia, they're basically, most of the time, I find it's in the deletion of it. They're just deleting it because it does not support the
Yes.
map of reality already. And to any information that doesn't support that is looks like a threat. People are, I think it was Virginia Satir who said that people are less afraid of death and more afraid of change because you're basically interrupting that their map of reality, which feels at the core, at the identity level, at the level of how they perceive reality, disturbing that, and that is a very scary thing.
Yeah.
So we need a way forward. We need something to a vision or a direction to go forward in.
Ah,
So if somebody says, I'm a failure, can you help me? Then I would say, well, who do you want to be instead of a failure? So I want to know, and I want to know what their words are. And so if they just come out and say, well, I want to be a success, okay, let's get to work on that. And then I would go through that process. But one of the things I want to make sure is that if they say they want to be a success, that this is truly something that they value, not something they want to be because other people praise and value successful.
correct. Correct.
So
Got
once
it.
I know that they truly value success and being a success, then I want to go under the hood. I want to find out, well, how are they creating this experience of being a failure? And it will be a database of experiences. And I will refer to them as counterexamples because they're counter to what they value. You know, a counterexample can be positive or negative, but in the case of
Get
this,
it.
in the case
This
of
is landing. This is landing for me. I don't know if you're familiar with a school of therapy called ACT,
yes,
acceptance commitment therapy.
yes, it's very similar. Yeah, there's a lot of similarities, especially with the values.
Yeah, that you have to find out what your values are, and then in some way, even if it's a small way, every day take action in alignment with those values. So if you have a huge goal, you may not be able to reach that every day, but if you take action that aligns with those values, then you can have those hits of fulfillment along the way.
Yeah, you know who told me about ACT? It was our friend Jürgen Rasmussen.
Oh, Jürgen.
Yeah, I didn't even know about it. And he was, I asked him about when people, when people say to him that, NLP isn't real, it's not scientifically proven, what do you say to them? And he brought up ACT, how similar it is. He's like, if NLP doesn't work, then ACT couldn't work. And he's absolutely right about that. So I didn't find out about that until after I'd already done years of self-concept. Um, what you just said about, you can do something, maybe you don't achieve the goal every day, but you can do something that's in alignment with it. This is a great conversation to have too, which is not as much based in the self-concept model, but expectation versus intention. Expectation, a goal is like an expectation. You either cross the finish line or you don't. Like a
You
goal is
don't.
an either or
Right.
kind of thing. And when we have expectations and we fulfill those expectations, it's not that great. It's kind of because that's what I expected, right? So when we do something that we expect to do, like if I expect the sun to rise in the morning and it does, I don't get all excited and celebrate. Or I don't, it doesn't, it's not fulfilling. It's just because of what I expected. But when we set an intention and we align to that intention, and it's more of a, it's not a, it's not a digital thing. It's an analog thing. It's
Yes.
I can do something at least to align to it, a little
Yeah.
something, and that counts. And that is a huge difference. So if you
That is the antidepressive. That's a structure where you cannot be depressed. If you hold to that structure and pattern, it is depression proof. You
exactly.
can't, there's, I also think this is interesting. Now my mind, which has been grieving, for those of you who don't know, I lost my kitty cat like 4 or 5 days ago, who was my child, my daughter of 16 years. I don't mean to disrespect those humans who have lost human children, but my brain is not up. But this brings up for me that it's a great pattern to prevent depression. That you cannot be depressed if it's a good it's a I would think it's a good skill set to teach kids in school. I
Absolutely.
would teach this to kids
Mhm.
instead of having them popping and rapping and doing the rest of them, teach them this kind of stuff so they get it.
Yeah, and when it comes to your identity, and I think what a lot of people do is they place expectations on themselves. And when they don't meet those expectations, they feel disappointed. When you don't meet an expectation, there's disappointment. When you do meet an expectation, it's just kind of like, oh, I expected it, right? But if it's about an intention and It's if it's about my values and it's about being the person I value. And I know my values very well. I've made a practice out of eliciting them, and that's part of my coaching practice. So I'm very well aware of them. So success is a value that I have. So when I do things that align with me being successful, I feel successful. And because I feel successful, I do more of them. It's a self-perpetuating and
Got it.
self-fulfilling prophecy. And that works so much better than, well, I need to do this. And when I do this, I will then be successful. And then the person does it and they don't feel any different because they expected it. But if they don't meet the expectation, then they're disappointed in themselves. They beat themselves up. And then they say things like, well, I guess I wasn't good enough or I didn't deserve it or, any of that other nonsense. And so they don't try anymore. It's a tragedy because there's so much unfulfilled potential in this world.
That's that. Thank goodness, or we wouldn't be coining. We wouldn't be making coin. If everyone were living to their full potential, we'd
Yeah.
go have to find another job.
Well, I think it would all, they say that when the tide rises, all ships rise.
That's true. That's what my
One of
buddy
those
says. My buddy Chase says we rise by lifting the tide for everybody,
things.
which is true. What else would you like to get? Again, I apologize. My brain is on like 40%. I am not at my normal functioning, but I really wanted to bring the value of the interview. I didn't want to postpone or cancel it because you have so much to bring to the table. What
Oh,
am I?
believe me, I think you're doing fine. I love these conversations too. You and I, man, when we start talking, we just geek out. And I think
Yeah,
it's a valuable conversation for people to hear.
I don't know that people who are not into NLP are enjoying it as much as we are, but here's the big pushback I have for you. Tremendous pushback.
Right?
So I've more and more have been leaning into my Buddhism, my Buddhist practice. I don't believe I'm not a Buddhist.
It's a
I don't.
Buddhist, it's a
Okay.
Buddhist rosary that I got in Cambodia.
Okay.
My wife and I just got back a few
Okay.
weeks ago.
Cool. So if people say, "Do you believe in rebirth or don't take rebirth?" I don't know. In fact, I brought it up to the guy who teaches at the temple about a quarter mile from me.
Well, you
I
had
said,
a mentor for a long time. Was it Shenzhen?
Shenzhen Young. Yeah, Shenzhen's around somewhere. He's in, last I heard a year ago, he was in China doing retreats. He's very happy. He just celebrated his 80th birthday. Now, anyway, I said, look, the Buddha taught, don't accept anything that I say is true. Go explore and verify for yourself. But on the other hand, major part of his teaching was rebirth. So how can I go explore my rebirth? And he said, you don't. Just pay attention to your actions. I thought that was very dismissive. That was like a rabbi or a priest ducking a question. But the real thing I want to push back on is a major Buddhist teaching is anatta, no self, that there isn't a self in there. And I've had that direct realization when I meditate of the disappearance of any sense of self. So
Sure.
speaking to you as someone who I'm assuming you meditate and you study Buddhism.
Non-duality more, some Buddhism, but mainly non-duality.
Yeah. So what would you say to a Buddhist who says there is no self in there? Or there's I know what Bandler would say. He'd say, this whole self concept, uh, just one self? What about all of them? No, he told a story once many years ago. He said he was walking by a Church of Scientology center and they said, do you want to take a personality test? And his response was, I just get to test one of them. So what would you say to a Buddhist who said, what does this talk about this
So I
identity?
wouldn't disagree with any of them, including Bandler. And what's funny about Bandler is that you do get the sense that this man has lived multiple lives as multiple personalities, and they're still all intact right there in front of you. Uh, yeah, so I studied a lot of non-duality, especially before I got into NLP, and I also credit studying non-duality to my understanding of NLP and being able to understand it rapidly. I also include learning your stuff when I was in college to being able to learn NLP very quickly. I mean, it's so good to just be able to, sometimes just taking away all the theory and just say, hey, here's the model, go do it the
Right.
experience that you gain from it. Like I had understandings about NLP that I didn't know that I was carrying around simply because I had used your work. And then they flared up again whenever I started actually learning NLP. And I was like, how do I know this? And so part of it was non-duality, part of it was your work.
Thank
Um,
you.
there is no separate self. Like there just isn't. And we can investigate that in real time. And so for the Buddhist, for the person who's into non-duality, like that is easy to demonstrate. There is no little man inside of me who's pulling the strings. And how do you differentiate between like my hands, my skin, and the air? Like everything is all together one clump of sort of reality. So I totally,
Dependent origination.
what's that?
The Buddhist concept is dependent origination.
Okay, I didn't know the term, so that's good to know. Now, this is the reason why it's called self-concept. Concepts are not real.
Ah, okay.
Concept.
Got it.
Yeah. So you're going to have a self-concept. And I get this question sometimes from Eastern people who watch my videos and they go, okay, I can hear you've got some Eastern going on in there. You've got some non-duality going on in there. So how do you reconcile this with the self and the self-concept? The thing is, and if you look at people like Nisargadatta Maharaj, Krishnamurti, when they were questioned about this, they would say, "Oh, you're going to have a personality. When you dissolve the separation between outer and self or other and self, that doesn't mean your personality goes away. You still have to function in the world." And so nature gives you this ability to make generalizations, to categorize things, to make meanings around you. Without that, you would not be able to navigate the world in which we do that. So if we're going to have one of these things, we might as well make it the best that we can. We might as well make it so that it fulfills us and serves us, especially in times when we need it most. And those times where like we're discouraged, we feel like failures, and but something comes through and says, well, no, we're gonna keep going. Then we have a direction, and we're gonna pick ourselves up, and we're gonna go. That is that self-concept, that continuity in time of who you are. So, for example, that concept of self, it's the only concept that we carry that transcends both time and space. So, when you were 3 years old, you are a completely different person now than when you were three. There is nothing about you that is the same anymore. The only thing that's the same is the same RNA messaging that tells your body to recreate what who you are. But at the same time, that has even changed, right? The messaging has changed because you don't look like you did when you were three. You're not made of the same cells or matter that you were when you were 3 years old. I sure hope you don't have the same beliefs that you had when you were 3 years old, but maybe you do. I've had some fun conversations with you. So everything about you has changed in every way. But when you look back and you think about the times that you may still remember when you were 3 years old, you will say, when I was 3 years old. So you are spreading that definition of self all the way back then. And then, yeah, and then when you think into the future, you think when I will go do this or that, right? So we're spreading ourselves into the future based on this generalization of self. So we have ourself fully connected from every memory we have ever had in the past. It's fully aligned, fully part of this idea of self, and then the same thing into the future. Now, the space part of it, and the reason why I'm saying time and space is because these are the two dimensions in which we process reality, time and space. When you go to a different location, your identity doesn't change. It remains. It stays solid. The same sense of self you've been carrying around with you your whole life. I love to travel. I just got back from Southeast Asia and China. Every time I landed in one of these countries, I'm still me. Still, I didn't go, who is this body? Like you're still carrying around that same
You know
generalization.
what's very funny about that? I don't travel for work anymore the way I used to. I used to travel a lot and do speed seduction. And everyone knows who watches this channel that I'm also Ross Jeffries, the guru of Gash, the Prince of Poon, the King of Coups. Everyone knows that. There's no, and we're still highly ranked. I don't know how that's possible. It's a crazy world. Any case, it used to be the case when I would travel. As soon as I got in the taxi, that tells you how old I am. My sense of there would be like this sense of novelty, almost like an aperture opening. The world literally got brighter and bigger, and it felt as if I was leaving all of my old sadnesses and limiting beliefs and everything behind. And when I walk through I'm telling you now, I'm not making this up. When I walked into the streets of London or Norway, whatever it was, people would say there's something different about you. And not just because I look different, like because I'm an American. And I felt different. I felt bigger, like a different, almost like a different human being. I don't know what that's about. I suspect, I agree with you, first of all. Well, everything you said is true. I'm not gainsaying it. I'm just exploring that phenomenon. I think what it is when a human, me, anybody is in a certain environment, that environment has anchors in it. And I don't just think they're physical anchors. I think there's something beyond the physical. I think there's energetic patterns, etc. And when you step out of that, you free something up or you get rid of something that's holding you back. I believe now we're diving even deeper. So I'm just going to ask you, we can go off the record, but we don't need to. Do you believe there's a spiritual component to this work?
It depends on how you mean that. So if you mean
I
that,
mean, I mean something other than you're right. I mean, I hate that word. See, it's a sign that my brain is fogged that I'm even using it. So let me go back up. Do you believe there's a non-local component to this that does not involve um, merely matter and energy and language written and vocal? There's something being transmitted. I don't know if I can explain it any better.
I think I know what you mean. So about that, I'm agnostic about. Like, I don't have the evidence to believe that there is. I don't have compelling evidence that there's not. I'm just going by what I experience in this, whatever this experience is of life and me and this whole thing. So, do I believe that humans have what we call a spiritual side? Absolutely. I felt it. I'm an atheist. I know what that feeling is, and I can identify it as being different than, say, a mental experience or an intellectual experience or
Yeah.
loving experience. There is something called a spiritual experience. You can call it different words, and I've definitely felt it. And here was the other thing too. Steve Andreas thought of himself as not a spiritual person at all. He was also an atheist, and he started understanding because Connie Ray is actually very much into Eastern style philosophies and Buddhism and that sort of thing. And so he would kind of encounter these mystics through her. And he would see how he modeled some of them actually and used them for the self-concept model. And he gives a lot of explanations as to like how he thinks this fits and the whole thing about, the personality. It's not about us not having a personality. It's about dissolving that separation between us and other, which makes us self-conscious, which is the opposite of being confident. So he goes into a lot of these things. And I went to Steve one time and I said, okay, maybe this is my non-duality background, but I'm having these weird experiences that I can't call them anything other than spiritual. It's that when I'm working on my self-concept, like I was telling you, I would model the databases that you're using to feel like you're ambiguously organized, and I would start finding out what's the structure of those, and then we would start altering the structure to let in new information that would then transform this into a quality of being organized. When I was doing that work, I was doing this work on myself every single day, I would get these weird feelings of like, okay, I'm working on my identity. So who's the one working on my identity? And it
Yeah.
would it would kind of go into these weird sort of meditative realms
Mhm.
where I was like, what's really happening here? And who and what's real and what's me? What's the concept? What's not the concept? What's awareness? So I couldn't really put words to it, but I explained it to Steve in an email, and his response was, yeah, I've been there too. I don't know how to explain it. I don't know how to put words to it.
That's all I wanted to hear.
Yeah.
That's what I wanted to hear because I've had the same experiences. I'm also an atheist. I find some of the smartest people are, now I'm really going to get hate mail. Hate mail, just put subject, delicious hate mail. I've found, but I've had some odd experiences, mostly only when I'm doing work with clients where I have experienced things that I have gotten data that are not being picked up through calibrating facial expressions or anything like that.
Oh,
This
I
is,
got a spooky one to tell you about. You want to hear it?
yeah, of course. Tell me.
So I was working with this guy, and for some reason, he couldn't see me. It was on Zoom, and there was something to do with, I don't know, his settings or something. And he could, every time we coached, He couldn't see me, and I was like, oh, it's okay. It's important that I'm able to see you because, we calibrate people as we're coaching them, right? So I'm coaching him. He can't see me. And I start to notice something really interesting. He's mirroring me, but he can't see me. This is so bizarre. Yeah. So someone's in rapport with you and that you're leading when they're mirroring you, right? So like if you scratch right here and then a
Yeah.
few seconds later
Yeah.
that person does that, you're leading, right? You're in rapport and you're leading. He starts doing that. And I'm like, what the hell is going on? So I start playing around with it. And I start to go, okay, well, I'm going to do something different. I'm going to scratch right here. A few seconds later, he would do the same thing. And I was like, how is this even possible? He can't see me. I would change my tonality. He would shift his tonality. I was like, okay, well, he can hear me. That's the thing. But I would do something else that he could only mirror by seeing me. And he still did it. It only happened to me once. Not, I don't normally coach people where I can see them and they can't see me. But this was one of those times that it happened, and he was mirroring me visually, and he couldn't see me.
How does my audience stay in touch with you?
You can find me. The easiest way to find me is on YouTube. You just search my name, you'll find a ton of videos. And then I give away free things in my videos all the time. So if you want to be on our email list, just opt into one of those free things. You can get on our email list.
Ladies and gentlemen, thanks to my guest, Damon Cart. I don't know why I'm looking out there, but I am, and we'll see you next time. The Influencer's Edge is brought to you by the Rapid Sales Accelerator. If you're ready to skyrocket your sales by 30% or more in just 90 days, then you need to claim your free training right now. You'll learn 4 words that will compel your prospects to trust you like they were children within the first 3 to 5 minutes of any conversation across any platform and any medium. You'll learn how to give your prospects objection amnesia, to crush objections like, I need to talk to my spouse, or I need more time to think it over, or it's too expensive. If you'd like to claim your free training now, go to www.paulrossbook.com. Do it before your competition does it now. Thank you for tuning in to the Influencer's Edge, where you get the latest breakthroughs, cutting-edge insights, tools, and techniques so you can leapfrog over the pack in sales, influence, and persuasion. Remember to visit our website at www.theinfluencersedge.com to enjoy even more great episodes like this one. We look forward to seeing you again on the Influencer's Edge Show.